Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode 4 of Survivor Borneo. Professor Tim watches Borneo. Sorry, I completely mangled that. I've spoken before about what Logcast has done to my brain. Let's do this again. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Survivor NSFW Rewind. Professor Tim watches Borneo. I am your host, Karen Eisenberg, and I'm going to bring in Professor Tim and our guest in just a sec. But before I do that, I just want to make a very brief statement about what's been going on. In the last 2 weeks, since the last time we've talked, the world has changed again, right? It seems now that we are just living in a different disaster movie every week. So I think it was absolutely the right call to pause the podcast last week, and I think it's the right call to resume it this week. But just like everything I do, and this is a good opportunity to say that also to my listeners, I love feedback, and people are going to tell me that this is a bad idea to say this because maybe I don't want to hear the feedback, but I do. I don't need the creepy messages. I've already gotten a couple of those. I'm not talking about those people. But in general, if there's anything about the podcast that you like, that you don't like, that you think I'm doing well, that you think I could do better, please let me know. So I am trying to thread a needle here because it's very important to us that we're not a political podcast. This is a place that people come to talk about a TV show, and we want it to remain that. But at the same time, you can't ignore what's been going on, and we don't want to ignore it. So I just want to say that we stand solidly behind the protesters. We do believe that Black Lives Matter. And there's really not much else I can say to add to that. So having said that, let's talk Survivor. So first, let's bring in my co-host, Professor Tim Wilson. How are you doing today, Tim?
Hello, I'm doing so well. I've been drawing all day, so I'm reaching out to people in other reality TV shows, and so almost the Survivor child. I'm reaching out to people in Love Island, and so I was drawing a Love Island person today, who I'm hoping to chat with later. A Greek man called Alexei, and Heraclides.
I'll say right now for anybody, if you're not following Professor Tim on Instagram, I really recommend it. We saw him sketching just a little bit, I think, when he was on the circle, but he is just a fabulous. I didn't realize also you do animation.
I do animation and I sing as well. Today was the 155th. I think I said it was 150th anniversary of the opening of one of the few music halls left in the UK. And for 25 years, it used to host a TV program called The Good Old Days, and people in the audience would get dressed up in Victorian or Edwardian costume and sing along with these acts, which were like sort of America's Got Talent, but more muted. And so I sat down at the piano this morning and sang Joshua, and stuck it on internet. And then I thought, why don't I sit down and rewrite the lyrics for Survivor as a tribute? Because you told me about this challenge where fans of Survivor write new lyrics for old songs. But I'm afraid I've been rather useless and I just haven't got round to it. So I will try and do it for next week.
If you would like to write us a song, Tim.
Next week I'll write you a song about next week's episode to a 19th century or early 20th century music hall song with a really catchy and inappropriate tune. But it will have a chorus which we can all sing.
And you want to say, I do not want to steal Rob Sesternino and Josh Wigler's thunder. Not that I could, but I guess this is not something I planned. But I did teach Tim about the wand off, and if he wants to sing a song next week, Professor Tim will be singing us a song next week.
Yeah, or I'll post it and you can play it or something. But
awesome.
Yeah.
and then let me also bring in our guest. We are joined also by Colin Stone of the Dom and Colin podcast. Colin,
hey, how's it going? Great to be here. Great to be in the presence of the Wand Prof, as I'm sure he's about to eventually become known. It's gonna take it all over. So this is exciting stuff to be here in the very early days.
Colin, I fear I fear that's loaded with potential double entendre. Which I rise with the greatest of pleasure. But there are lots of rumors about Ian McKellen and Gandalf, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, no, hey.
And Colin, what a pleasure to meet you. What a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise. I'm thrilled to be here. Big fan of yours. So this is very exciting stuff. I've certainly spent a decent amount of time talking about Survivor with one British person, but I'm very eager to expand the repertoire, I guess.
Oh, well, it is extraordinary. I mean, there's so much of Survivor that I find sort of irritating. And just when I'm sitting and fuming about the thing which irritates me, I suddenly become captivated by something else. And I think the captive element outweighs the irritating moments. And the irritating moments are mostly, I think, things I'm simply not familiar with. And yet I think they come from our stable. They're all really sort of J.M. Barrie, Peter Pan things. And the first play I directed and designed in the UK was Peter Pan, and so I have a sort of grumpy relationship with the idea of people going off camping.
Does the show itself? Sorry, does the show itself? Because obviously reality TV, as you are personally aware for sure, is very popular in England as well. But is there a piece of Survivor that feels distinctly American, or does it generally feel like the players could just as easily be British?
There's lots of things which come across to me as being sort of American, because you've got the summer camps and things like that, which we don't really have.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Really?
we really don't have them. Maybe we will now, and I think they're quite a good idea. But I think they come from the sort of scouting movement, and they're quintessentially British in their origin, but somehow we've abandoned them. And so I find my irritation rises when I see people lighting flames and stuff and sitting around taking all that very seriously. And then I find I'm taking it seriously too. And I think, what am I doing? I've entered this never land.
Would you keep watching?
Never do again.
Would you keep watching if it weren't for this podcast, or would this be something you would check out for a little bit and then tune off of?
What's extraordinary is it evokes more passion and more emotions than Love Island. I managed Love Island until episode 4, and then I gave up completely.
I would have told you not to bother. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad show, but if you're just kind of learning about reality TV, Love Island is not important, right? There's nothing about it that they've done that is going to be any better.
Karen, now I'm collecting friends from Love Island. I think I see what they've done. And the episodes are no longer available on terrestrial TV, so I can't look them up. It's really embarrassing. But
I can teach you how to get around that after the podcast.
Please do. We'll have a secret talk about all these things. But I just find there's a sort of tackiness, a gluiness, a stickiness. Tackiness is the wrong word. There's a stickiness to Survivor, which really, however irritated I get, I seem to be coming back with a certain amount of pleasure, and I can't say I've really experienced that with any other reality TV programs. I mean, I certainly enjoyed the first series of The Circle, but that may have been because I was preparing to go on it myself. The second series of The Circle, I just saw myself doing it, and I couldn't take any more of it. I think Colin, I salute you for getting through it and for watching more of me.
I mean, it's wild to even think about from my perspective as someone who's been basically a hardcore fan of reality TV since it was first becoming really popular in the early 2000s or late 90s, maybe even, and never been on any of the shows myself, to even consider the idea of your perspective of like just being thrown completely in the deep end with no real frame of reference 25 years after this is all being developed is like absolutely mind-blowing to me.
One of the things which I was told about the Circle before I went on was that it was totally different to any other reality TV show. And you know more than I know, Colin. So what do you think? Do you think it is?
I mean, it certainly has carved out its own space within the reality TV community. I think putting that kind of really heavy emphasis on this is the reality show about social media, essentially, I think is a brilliant idea. And I think that has really helped establish it as, as far as I can tell, a major player right away in the grand scheme of reality TV with all the international spinoffs. And with that in mind, I think there's very little doubt that it is distinct enough to the point that it is becoming something that seems to me at least to be here to stay in many different places. I think not many franchises have been able to pull that off. So I definitely feel like The Circle is something special for sure.
It's very refreshing to hear.
Yeah, and I also really enjoy it, and I've spoken about this before, but about the fact that they can cast people, you know, your level of physical, you know, ability to do physical challenges, your age, any disability, none of that matters.
Your quantity.
Right.
2 or 3 people could be one single character, which I think quite fun. But the other thing which I felt during The Circle, which I felt was sort of emerging in the first series, and which was very much the thing that I was aware of in the second series, but it wasn't there in the subsequent series in Brazil and America and France. Was it all about reciprocity and friendship, and I thought that is unusual. But in fact, what seems to have taken over is this sort of desire to win, and in this episode of Survivor, we've again got people going on about the money, and I find this very strange. You know, I remember in The Circle that there was that moment where we were asked about the money. What would you do to get the money, to get your hands on that money? I was thinking, well, nothing really. I don't think it comes into the picture. And I'm pretty certain. I'm pretty certain most of us felt that way. So certainly I felt that way. Certainly Woody would have done, and I think Ella did as well. I just don't think it entered into our consciousness. And
over the course of Borneo, over the course of this season of Borneo, it really does seem like most of the people are very averse to playing the strategic kind of a game.
Oh, you think they're averse to doing strategy?
Not the people who end up.
Well, Tim hasn't seen anything beyond.
I've only seen up to episode 4, so you have to play these games with your head, because you mustn't give me any spoilers.
No, I'm sorry. No, there are certainly people, as we see start getting set up here, who are very interested in playing the strategic game. But this is really, I think, what I'm getting at is the only season in Survivor history where there are even an overwhelming number of people who are thinking along those kinds of early Circle lines of the money's not even an issue. I'm here for the social experiment, and playing the game is almost kind of a nasty version of that. And I was actually something I've always wanted to ask you or any Circle player. I don't know how much you can even get into this, but I got the sense when I was watching it that they were not big fans of you guys explicitly talking even about alliance, and particularly in season 1, it seemed like.
I think we were strictly forbidden to talk.
Right. And I've always wondered if, honestly,
about alliances.
Yeah, I've always wondered. This is one I've brought this up a couple of times, like over the years on my own podcast. But I've in watching this episode and seeing the way that they present the early days of the first season of Survivor, it's always been something I've wondered about. The idea of if, like, Mark Burnett in his mind really didn't want this to be like a overly strategic game and wanted it to be more of this is a social experiment, and it's about what kind of personalities come together and who conflicts with each other. And I wouldn't be surprised, at the very least, if they had no intention at all of this becoming like a deeply strategic game over the course of its evolution. I think there were a lot of people in season 1 in particular who were, I would imagine, at least potentially, they're doing more of what they would have wanted, and that the explicit alliance building may have been counter to what they had been hoping for.
Yeah, I will. Greg is, during this episode, Greg is talking increasingly about just a board game, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's suddenly aware
Yeah.
of strategic elements. I mean, he obviously gets bored with his coconut and then starts talking about the board game. But so I need to correct what I just said about the circle, because we were told we weren't allowed to discuss how we'd voted.
Okay.
And I certainly felt that meant we weren't allowed to discuss any alliances. But clearly James, Paddy, and Georgina felt that you were allowed to discuss alliances because they created one.
Right.
And I thought I was quite clever, really. But I don't think they've disobeyed the rules, and I don't think they ever talked about how they were voting. So it was,
and again, because if they weren't allowed to do it, we wouldn't have seen it on the edited TV product, right? So they must have. They knew it was happening, and they allowed it, and they showed it.
Yeah. And indeed, subsequent series have actually moved very much down that route, though not quite to that extreme. And I think that's probably the way to win, in fact.
Yeah. No, we'll see. Because Tim doesn't know this because he hasn't seen other seasons. Even just when we get into Australia and Outback into the second season, there's a huge difference in how alliances are thought of. And so Colin, you could, because Colin was watching this, in real time, wasn't covering it, but was watching it. Yes? Were you?
Yeah, I was 12 years old or whatever. So it was
oh my goodness!
You're making Tim and I feel very old.
Sorry. No, but yeah,
no, I can think back to when I was 12.
So let's just jump right into the episode. Did you say that
Can I just detour very slightly? Because I had a conversation with one of my circle friends 2 or 3 days ago, which is on Instagram. So in Instagram, sorry. And he was saying that somebody from Survivor had called him to congratulate him about the Circle of Trust, and that they had used the same principle on Survivor in the last episode, in the last series.
Is he talking about like voting blocks? What do you know? What he's talking about?
I don't really know. So I'm just throwing that out, throwing that out there, and saying, it's very nice to see that sort of cross-fertilization.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of. I would guess there are a lot of reality TV alumni who have spent a decent amount of time watching The Circle these last 6-8 months or so. I would guess you are pretty recognizable to many people that have played on CBS before.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, because the thing. So I told you, the U.S. fan community that I'm plugged into discovered the UK Circle in the middle of your season.
All right.
I heard about it from Taron Armstrong, and I'm not sure if he was the first one to find it, but that's what the community here. So. But then people started talking about it, and what a great show it was. So it definitely appeals to the same people who watch things like Survivor and Big Brother, et cetera, even though the UK Circle was somewhat less competitive.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Okay, Colin, you were going to introduce us to the.
What was I introducing? I'm sorry.
Yes, you were. Yes, you
was I introducing?
What were we talking about?
Throw us into this moment.
I'm sorry. I don't know what moment I'm throwing us into. I'm sorry.
The beginning of episode 4. I think.
The beginning. I mean, this is what I want to avoid. Is I know this is the 4th episode that you have all watched, but for me, so much of the noteworthy stuff is just how different things are, and how just tracing the evolution of it. And I obviously don't want to just be repeating the same things you guys have been talking about for the last 4 weeks or whatever.
Colin is very, very knowledgeable about Survivor. Please feel free to point things out, because I'm sure I'm missing stuff.
How did you feel when you were 12 watching this? Had you watched it from the very beginning? Did you watch episode 1?
So no, I didn't watch episode 1, but when I was 12 years old, I was in love with this show. So this is 2 weeks, 3 weeks potentially before. Yeah, I started with episode 7. I started with the merge, when the two tribes become one tribe.
Oh, yeah.
I had just heard this during the early days of Survivor, when it was first kind of like catching fire with the American public. I was told to watch it and that I would really like it. And being a defiant 12-year-old, I said, I'll not be watching it. This is and after a month and a half or whatever of just hearing people rave about it, I finally tuned in to the merge, and I immediately just fell in love with the game element of it. I'm a big fan of games in general. And even back in the days before most of the people really even were approaching it as a strategic game, it still was a totally fascinating concept to me. And there may have been like a season or two in the teens or so where I was falling a couple of weeks behind, but for the most part, over the last 20 years, it has just been smooth sailing for me in terms of staying caught up with and really involved with the show and so forth. Yeah. So what I was trying to say, sorry, is I don't want to just come in here and be repeating the same things that you guys and your other guests have been talking about, but there is so much from this episode that really blew me away in terms of seeing how far we have come over 20 years. It is wild how different some of this stuff is.
Okay. Yeah, so what was the first? What's the first thing that you that?
So the first thing that really stood out to me is Jeff Probst right away is leading off the episode by explaining the rules of the game, which obviously, which of course there's and all of these things that I'm sure I'll get into like make complete sense. Obviously, you would do this the first time around, but it's just so crazy to think about how much the game has evolved and how many things just are. We've seen so many times that they go without saying. And during these early days, it reminds me of, as someone who's been heavily involved in poker for the last many years as well, there was a time when every episode of Poker on TV began with them explaining the rules of how the game works. And now it's been at least a decade since they've figured that's kind of something that goes without saying. If you're watching this, you kind of get it. And Survivor, back in the early days, it really is incredible just to see not just Jeff explaining the rules, but like people wearing ponchos, sunglasses. They bring their torches to challenges. The torch, it's wild to see the dry run, I guess, of Survivor, especially the very, very early days of it when they're overtly still figuring so much of this out on the fly, but I love it. It's such a fun time capsule to just knowing where it goes.
Right. Yeah. So like even this episode, we have at least one situation where they did not capture something when it was happening live. And so they had to go back in confessional and tell us about it rather than showing it to us. So even in the first episode, they got much, much better, I guess, as it was going along to learn how to avoid that. If that's a double negative, but to be in the right place in the right time with the right camera, right, so that they don't have to go back. And but I'm saying, but it's just amazing. But like I said, they're all figuring this out as they go along, because it's not only
what is the moment, Karen, that they didn't catch?
We'll get to it. I think what was I referring to? Don't ask me hard questions. It's not my that my.
I'm so sorry.
No. I'm trying to think.
The immunity challenge in particular, it felt like there was a lot of hopping from place to place because
I couldn't even really follow it, but there was something else also. Yeah. All right. So let's jump in. And what I do with these episodes is we kind of go through loosely chronologically. We don't cover every conversation because we'd be here for 4 hours. But Colin, if you want to, especially because you are the one who has the information at your fingertips in terms of like all the things that have changed and all these little things in the episode that I might not have picked up on. So please feel free to jump in.
Sure.
So we just have the first thing we see is, it's raining again and they're cold and miserable again. And Gretchen, finally wants to move the shelter back into the canopy, which seems like, how did it end up where it was on the beach? Was it BB?
BB. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So
BB was determined, and then he built the ditch as a vain effort to try and sort of keep keep the thing where he wanted it in the first place. If you make a bad decision, admit it and move. They knew they'd made a bad decision.
Right.
Well, I mean, one of the early things that stood out to me as all this rain was coming down is just how weird it is to see the survival element be a focus of the TV show. And this continues to be a thing, not just over the course of this episode.
They really don't talk about it much anymore. It's all about the game.
Yeah.
And the game elements and the trinkets and
There's just so much that they feel like they have to get into the episode because it's like relevant to how the vote plays out these days, that there's so little time comparatively for character scenes for the most part and survival, obviously. But even like the previously on is gone now these days. They're just really consolidating and being as time efficient as they can.
The opening sequence with all of the players, with those and the names and everything, they've cut that down, and now it's gone. They don't even have that at all, which I think is kind of unfortunate.
I must say, although I like the opening sequence because it reminds me who I'm looking at, because I am really rather dim on this front. But I find it slightly irritating that I've got to see the people who've already gone. Isn't that
one thing that they did at one point, Colin, that they were, or certainly like after the merge, they would do a different opening sequence with just the people who were still in the game? They
did. For many years, it was all 16, however many players, all season long. At a certain point, like right around Gabon, I know definitely was done this way. Tocantins, I believe,
halfway through.
About halfway through, they did start removing people either as they got eliminated or once they hit the merge, they pulled out everyone who was taken out pre-merge, and then the merge people became either still in the game or they would list the jurors at a certain point so the time wouldn't be all thrown off. This is definitely something they've toyed with in many different ways over the years, and at this point it seems like they've decided to just get rid of it entirely.
Right. Sometimes they make it and they put it on YouTube, right?
It's one of those things that comes out like 14 weeks into the season, like the day before the finale. Dalton Ross will tweet out, "Hey, here's the extended intro."
That was weird last episode. You're right. If you're going to make it and you're not going to put it on the episodes because you don't have time, but you want to put it on YouTube, I get all of that. But then why not just release it before the season rather than like right at the end, which is what they did the last time.
I suspect they did not make it until about week 14 or so that they.
The other thing which struck me as rather interesting about that opening sequence is some people were real and winking at the camera, and some people just had these sort of photographs on sort of trinkets, and I thought, how odd. Were they not worthy of a proper sort of
right? And it doesn't seem to be based on, because there could have been a possible spoiler in terms of when you go out, but that doesn't seem to be it, right? Some people got still photos and some people got a little moving. Who knows?
There are a lot of things over the course of this episode, particularly Tribal Council really stood out to me, with the lighting situation probably not being ideal compared to how it is by modern standards, where they really seem to be. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, how do they get back from Tribal Council? Because they seem to go there before it's quite dark, and then they have to come back.
That has also changed.
It varies a lot.
Borneo, looks like they actually didn't make them walk. I mean, I haven't confirmed that with a contestant, but it certainly seems that, yes, they actually would have. I think there was some discussion about it. They would take a stick to, ward off the snakes as they walk through the jungle. That stopped. I don't know exactly when they stopped it, but for a long time now. They drive them around in buses. But what they do is, obviously we never see that. And we still sometimes see the shots. They will do that long distance shot of them walking down the beach with their torches as if they are headed for Tribal Council, even though those of us who watch know in reality that that's not what's really happening. So what they do is they put them on buses. There's always somebody from production in there. And basically they're not allowed to speak, right? Because they don't want them to do anything. And I don't know if this was a thing. Probably not in the circle, because everything that you spoke had to go into the circle. So I don't know, like I'm saying, if you were like walking through the hallway or whatever, would you? But with Survivor, when when they shut down the cameras because everybody's getting on the bus, it's complete lockdown. They cannot speak. They're not supposed to even like gesture, make faces, whatever. That's harder to do. Is that right? But in terms of communication,
is that
a full answer to Tim's question?
Well, I was going to say, it seems like they do, and Tribal Council is the place where I really noticed it. It seems like they may have had much more limited options and had to do a lot of tricky camera angle selection and like zooming features to make the same shot look like different shots. As they're going. So,
Interesting.
a lot of, yeah.
So these people who've been living on a beach, then get in a bus. Do you think they realize that they're probably quite smelly as well at that point?
I think they realize that the whole time.
Yes, and I think production is also well aware of that.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who have to smell them.
Smelly but rather beautiful. Right, gosh. So
in terms of the number of cameras and stuff, again, I don't know anything specific about this, but yeah, I mean, now I'm sure that they, the sky's the limit in terms of their budget. I'm sure they get as many cameras and lights and as they want. Whereas back then, yeah, I'm just guessing that they probably only had maybe 2 cameras running, and like you said, and then they were just kind of editing it to make it look like there were more than 2 cameras.
I don't know about 2. I would guess there were more than that, but
maybe 3, but nothing like that.
Yeah, so. Yeah, it's definitely an entirely different presentation these days. They've been doing it so long that, I mean, such an overwhelming percentage of the process by design has become a completely well-oiled machine. I think they've made some modifications to make it more easily sustainable, potentially at the cost of overall quality in certain areas. But I do understand that that's a priority for them when this is 20 years in the making.
Right. Right.
Yeah. They had some lovely sort of posh film shots at the beginning of this episode with the rain, with the sunrise.
Mm-hmm. That's stuff they've always been great at. And there's also, but some point, Tim, I want to show Tim maybe like even the marooning from Winters at War, show them a modern season and just how different it looks, because I'm not sure that Tim is even really aware of just how different.
And we had those scenes of the birds flying across the sky. I just thought, this is charming. This could be a sort of nature documentary at certain points. And we
still get that. We still get those shots occasionally. I'm sorry, Tim, I need to talk over you. I'm saying and that's one of those things, but that has not changed. Even in the modern show, even given how little time they have or whatever, we still do get those little shots of the fish and the crabs. And
I think the thing that so often, I mean, this is the bit where I sort of beating on my drum all the time, really. I think so often people watch these shows and they don't realize just the sheer skill and quality of the team that are making them. It's incredibly good craft.
This is what I wanted to tell Tim also, was that who wrote the article? Was it Josh Wigler or was it Dalton Colin who covered the marooning for, probably, was it Winters of War? But I'm completely drawing a blank here, but it was a recent season where somebody really wrote a very long article about all the logistics of the marooning. Was that Dalton? Do you know what I'm talking about?
So over the last few years, the marooning, because that's when the press members are out there, has been pretty extensively covered. And I would be surprised if Dalton and Josh hadn't both written thousands of words about the actual process of the marooning. But in terms of production stuff, I know Mike Bloom is currently doing a big feature going through a ton of different behind the scenes stuff along those lines as well.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
you want to have some sense now with the modern game of just how many cameras and boats and everything are involved. I'll send it to you because it really is quite vast. And even for me, I was surprised at just how complicated it was.
Oh, yes, and equally, the equipment has improved significantly in the last 20 years. So things have got smaller, they're more mobile. You can do what is those hovering things?
Drones.
Drones. Yeah. But still, it requires a lot of skill. It's not about the equipment. It's about, you've got somebody behind that camera who says, this is a sunrise, we're going to get it. Right. And they get it. Mm-hmm. And I just think, wow, and it's a game show. And yet you've got this spectacular photography.
Yeah.
Oh, I think, not even like for season 1, they do a really good job. I think just in general, they do a really good job on Survivor. Even in the very early days, I think on the whole, they do an excellent job making all of this look cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
I could also add a little circle point here, that when the moment I got in front of the technicians with their cameras and stuff, whether this was in the pre-show stuff or the post-show stuff, I felt so comfortable. Really.
Oh yeah.
You just, when you're in the presence of professionals who know their trade so well, it's such a pleasure. And if this is where the great professionals in the business are moving towards reality TV, then we all need to be there. We need to see what they're doing. It's stunning, and I've been involved in documentary films a little bit, and but
I'd love to talk to you about that, because I'm a huge
there's a natural throwaway quality. It's effortless. This is what I'm trying to say. It's effortless, and I think that's why it's so important. And so often, it's the ephemera of life, the things which you just don't think are important, which are the most important thing. Those are the building bricks of our life. And you just say, oh, there's a sunrise. And you just don't really think about it, just how brilliant that shot is. And I frankly, that shot alone sold me the entire episode. I was bewitched from that moment. Yeah.
And so there wasn't a whole lot of strategy in this episode, but we did get to see, or not meet, because we met him before, but we've seen, I think this is the first time we've really seen focus put on Greg.
Oh yes, and the focus was taken off Dirk. And he tried so hard to get the focus back on him, and there was a lot of footage of him, and he did sort of bugger all, really. I'm sorry. Whoops. He did very little.
But I just wanted to talk about like the nature phone, with the coconut phone. But the part of that, and I only really caught this the second time I watched it this time. But I just thought I wanted to flag it. If you didn't notice this, maybe go back and watch it again. So Greg, they're doing whatever they're doing around camp, and Greg is having this conversation. And if you watch it, what's happened is, so he's talking, they all stop, right? They all stop working. They're listening. Okay. And then when they're done, they kind of, he quote unquote hangs up, and then he apologizes to everybody else as if he had been on a real phone call.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, I had to take that.
It's charming, but it's a wonderful way to pull attention. And that's what he does. He becomes a sort of leader by pulling attention with these little gimmicks. Yeah. And he loses interest in the coconut phone quite early on, but you can see why a television show would think that was great.
Yeah. Yeah. He knows how to make good TV. And Gretchen also said, so she said something which, again, I don't think had really seen. Again, it's more of a tell not show. But she said that in his own way, Greg is the leader of the tribe.
Yep, I think she's quite right. But she also establishes her authority. As I've got all this training. I know what to do. I ought to be leading, really. And she's not quite. She's sort of she's making noises. She's not quite taking control. He is taking control.
Well, but on the other hand, the problem generally on these shows, Tim, is that taking control visibly is generally the best way to get yourself voted out.
Yep. I also thought, long before we got to the end, I realized that Ramona was on her way out because we were seeing so much of her, and we were seeing a sort of constructed arc about how happy she was, how invested she was in the show, how much effort she was making. I thought, yeah, we know where this is going.
Right.
We know where this is going, and it was almost as if it was sort of marked with sort of little dots.
We talked about this whole idea of getting more time in your boot episodes. We said, what are we on episode 4? And Tim already.
But it wasn't. I'm afraid in her case, it wasn't productive time. It was it was production time. It was she was being produced. So that there was a story to it.
Hey, remember Ramona? Make sure you know that name by the end of the episode tonight when the votes are getting read.
Actually, she hasn't figured that much in a very positive way. She was ill throughout most of episode 2.
Right.
And I don't know. I just felt there was stuff there. There were little moments in her story in this episode where I thought, yeah, we could have gone there. That's interesting. And none of that was explored. I loved her point about having a white friend.
Yeah.
Well, quote unquote friend. We'll get there in a minute, but I was going to say, if Jenna is your friend, I'm not sure if you need any enemies.
Oh, I just thought with Ramona, there was a sort of innocence which was coming out, which I hadn't seen before, which I found very endearing.
Ramona definitely has her fans, even though we did not get to see a lot of her. And yet, like you said, and it seems like her biggest problem was that she definitely did get sick at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's a classic day two, like, undoing of people in the early seasons of Survivors. Like, it's so often that in these early seasons, people, their whole story is, well, I got sick on day one and that was it for me. Like, they had to prioritize challenge strength and that was the end of the line. And then one other thing I noticed that I loved in terms of how they set up the storyline here for, like, who's going to be voted out is they show us just kind of snippets without, we're still at the point where strategy is so far in the future, essentially, that's not something they even could show if they wanted to. And so it really is this Jeff Probst voiceover as they're walking to tribal council that I had completely forgotten ever existed, where he, in a voiceover, is setting up, will it be Ramona, who was sick for a while, or will it be Jervis, who wasn't good in the challenge, or there was some third party as well? Yeah, Colleen or something. Yeah.
So in the end, they want to make it sort of
that's incredible.
Well, so you could argue they're still doing the same thing, Colin. They're just not doing it as so overtly with
they're showing not telling, but explicitly telling is pretty incredible.
Right.
Yeah. Right. But this is anyway, all I'm saying is I was there long before we got to the end, and that wasn't the thing that got me in the episode. The thing that got me in the episode was extraordinary photography, and then seeing people like Greg. Greg is such an interesting and sort of likable character.
He is. And we'll see more of him. He's a great character.
Yeah, Greg was definitely
Richard comes across awfully in this program, in this episode, whereas he came across so well in the past, and Rudy comes across as a bit of a sort of sidekick. And I wouldn't have thought of that for Rudy.
Rudy would become Richard's sidekick?
Yeah.
It's definitely an odd couple, but that's what made it so cripping on TV.
But I think Rudy only really has one scene in the entire episode, and that's the sort of yes man.
Right. But this is also pretty common because somebody from Pagong went home. We got more focus on the Pagong tribe. That's something that, again, we still see to this day on Survivor. If you didn't lose, if you won the immunity challenge, at that point they basically just take all the focus off that tribe and put it on the people who are going home. And so what happens is the people from the other tribe, Mitagi, like you said, we just don't see a whole lot of. That's just how it goes.
With so much that goes on in terms of, like, advantages and hidden immunity idols these days, they just don't have a choice about how they have to divvy up the maybe 10, 15 minutes of free time they essentially have left now to show what they think is going to be pertinent for, like, building up to the vote. And when only one of the teams is going to be going to the vote, they'll generally get, like, 3 of the 4 scenes before the immunity challenge, and then just whoever wins the immunity is just done from that point forward. So it becomes even more exaggerated over time.
Right. Yeah. And so, especially, like I said, in seasons where, so here it's been going back and forth pretty evenly, right? We've had Tagi, Pagong, but there have been seasons where that hasn't been the case, and, one tribe keeps losing. And the problem is we never really get to know the people on the other tribe nearly as well, right? Because they're always focusing on the people who are going home. So that is something, like I said, many things have changed. That's something not as much. But I just wanted to, so Colin, this is just something else I just wanted to flag quickly with you. So Sue is still looking for the tapioca. And whatever, right?
Oh God, that's so dull.
Well, but this is my question. I read, was it Mark Burnett's book or the Stingray? One of the books I read, they indicated the tapioca was actually introduced by production, that's actually not native to Borneo.
Wouldn't surprise me. I
just wanted to talk about a little bit about, for Tim, like other times where Survivor production has, like you said, messed with the environment or introduced things.
You
So
will
the
see
first
many chickens show up in environments where I'm not entirely sure chickens were there before the Survivor producers came along.
Right. Suddenly there's a wild chicken, or in one case, I was thinking with Game Changers with the goat.
Yeah.
Right.
The
That
goat
baby goat just happened to wander past. Right. And then there was a whole discussion about, do we kill him and eat him?
Do they really? Are they not leaving a baby goat to Sandra when she's gonna chop? I don't. That one I bought, but there have definitely been some chickens over the years that I would imagine were not organic.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so that's a thing. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I keep seeing it, because they were like, we spent all the money to bring the tapioca. They need to find the damn tapioca.
I see. Yeah. Yes. But how long does it take to grow tapioca trees?
You got me, Colin.
I mean, I never realized tapioca came in tree form. I thought it came in a can.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I've had tapioca pudding. I didn't enjoy it, and that was a bit of my curiosity about tapioca.
Tapioca and the stuff left in a pool by a frog, frankly, they're interchangeable in my mind. And I'm not really partial to either.
I don't think I've had tapioca in 20 years.
There you are.
Of any variety.
I would add a few decades to that, actually.
But I guess if you're that hungry, you'll eat it.
No, I will not. We have standards. No. We have standards. Yes. So I found it so interesting that Sue was Sue's tapioca drive was linked to her irritation with Sean.
Yeah, that was wonderful, because with the way they set up those shots. Colin, have we ever seen, I'm sure we've seen it, but it's not a common thing. They were actually able to get both of them in the shot. So we don't even have Sue complaining about that all Sean wants to do is make a bowling alley, right, while she's looking for food. But we then actually see, like I said, in these long shots, these two things happening in tandem, right? Sue is working and Sean is making a bowling alley.
So did Sean not know he was irritating people at that point? Is he that blind?
I think that that's what I think they wanted to get into. That's what they wanted Survivor to be, is who's unknowingly rubbing people the wrong way and who is charming. And I don't think this is completely harebrained potentially. And I have absolutely nothing to back this up, but it just feels
I know this was flagged up in the last episode as the big thing in this episode, but in fact it didn't feature for much more than sort of a few minutes. And we didn't see the finished bowling alley.
No, I'm not sure. Do we see that later? Colin, remind me. I don't think so.
If we do, it is something I have forgotten.
In passing,
for the last 20 years. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just asking. But that's my, in any case.
And Sue's see other Survivor bowling alleys as challengers.
No, but this is just it's one of these cute character moments. And yes, in terms of him being tone deaf, I could see it with Dr. Sean. With him not being aware. Or I could just easily see him being completely aware of how much he's annoying Sue and doubling down on it.
Was he the one, or was it Dirk later on who's giving her a hard time when she's telling them they wasted their time spending all day out fishing and catching nothing? Was he being kind of combative there, or was that mostly Dirk?
Don't remember.
There's some scene where they're out all day and they don't.
I remember. I'm trying to remember if it was just Dirk, or if it was Dirk and Sean.
I don't remember, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Which what I'm wondering is, I'm using my forensic cap here, though I realize only one of us got a cap on properly today. So obviously I'm not properly dressed, but I wonder if I wonder if the bowling alley is the issue. I wonder if it's an excuse, because Sean is equally dismissive of Sue's looking for nuts. He doesn't talk about looking for tapioca; it's nuts, and that's fairly. It's fairly combative, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, but again,
I think it's about a personality clash rather than a bowling alley versus tapioca.
Oh, of course. And
I think the clash has occurred earlier. We just don't see that. The bowling alley is a symptom of the clash, not the cause of it.
I think that's right. I think that's for sure right.
I think this is TV trying to sort of give us some reason for this antagonism, and it doesn't quite ring true. It seems a bit sort of bizarre.
I believe it. I believe there's definitely conflict. I don't know that it's because of this bowling alley necessarily. I think
Right.
Right. I could imagine somebody whispering in the ear of Sean saying, "Ooh, wouldn't that make a nice bowling alley?"
Right.
Oh yeah, of course.
You say, yes, why not? And off he goes to make a bowling alley without realizing he's been completely set up. And how else would you get that shot with them both in the shot, actually?
Right. You're saying that they not only suggested it, but they kind of suggested that he do it in a certain area so that they could get that shot of Sue. Certainly possible.
Yeah, this is manufactured, but what is not manufactured is the irritation, which is mutual, completely mutual, and that is captured rather brilliantly on camera. However much people, the sort of production have played with sort of staging this, they're staging something which is real.
Right. And that's why it works, like you said, because if the emotions weren't real, right, these people are not professional actors, generally we would tell. Whereas in this case, the emotions are definitely real. The only question is exactly how they came to be.
Yeah. And it may just simply mean they just brushed each other up the wrong way on day one. But so I didn't see that coming. I don't remember a squabble between Sean and Susan beforehand. I don't remember either of them.
No, we haven't seen it. But again, it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
So the next thing that we see is we get tree mail, and they have to make, so this is a reward challenge for distress signal. 2 hours after sunrise tomorrow, we're going to drop a crate for the most visible SOS signal. And they can do kind of whatever they want, because whoever has to be seen from the air, and Probst and the helicopter pilot are going to decide which one is more visible from the air, and they will get this box of comfort stuff. And this is also pretty common that around this point in the show, that this is one of these rewards that they can get, that comfort that you can get, hammocks and pillows and things like that. And then they also, sorry?
And test them out at the same time.
Right. And I think Mark Burnett basically said that there was not a whole lot of interest in those things when they were originally offered. So that's why they added. People were like, yeah, we don't need pillows. I think they already had pillows. They had taken like the burlap sacks and some of the food had come in, and they filled it up with some kind of leaves or something. So they were like, we already have pillows. So I think it was Jen especially was really, really, really vocal that, she wanted
a spice rack.
Right. So she wanted a spice rack. And then Dirk asked for a fillet knife.
That was fascinating, because this is not something that this blew me away, that before the challenge started. Yeah, each tribe sent someone to go meet with Jeff Probst and demand an item like that. That rocked my world, seeing that.
I loved it.
I loved it. No, I think it was fantastic. I wish they would do this more. That makes a ton of sense. There was definitely a point later on in the season where famously the players essentially like revolted when they showed up to the reward challenge and weren't satisfied with the reward or something to this effect.
Right.
They said, we're not doing it unless you make this a much better reward. And they did. It worked. They like unionized essentially at some point down the line.
So what I heard was that also happened here.
Yeah, I believe it. That 100% checks out. I'd never heard that before, but that definitely tracks.
Right.
I heard that when I listened to the Survivor historians like 8 years ago or whatever, but it's been a while.
No, they're revisiting Borneo.
So this is what's killing me, is I'm so far behind now on podcasts because of quarantine. It seems counterintuitive, but I'm never out and about driving or going to my day-to-day stuff. So I'm so far behind on podcasts. It's brutal, but I have seen that they've been doing those, but I haven't gotten to listen yet.
Right.
Yeah. Did you not feel when they opened up their package that it was like seeing one of those scenes from what's the TV series Queen of the South? I haven't. The whole thing looked like a box full of cocaine. It was quite
I absolutely see what you're saying now that you frame it that way.
That was one thing that went through my mind. The other thing that went through my mind, and so hasn't stopped going through my mind, was Survivor starts in the early 2000s.
Yes.
2000.
Year
Yeah.
2000.
And Lost starts in about 2004 or 2005.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Lost is presumably a sort of drama version of Survival.
It was deeply influenced by Survivor. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just hadn't thought of that at all. But yeah, sorry. Thank you very much for confirming.
Yeah, 100%. The creators of Lost that was like half of the goal. It was Survivor and something else. I'm spacing on it now, but it was that was the way they pitched it, was like Survivor plus whatever.
Yeah, with a little bit of strange philosophy, cod philosophy.
Right. Were you a Lost fan? We certainly don't need to go
I did watch almost all of Lost. Actually.
Okay, good.
I
think skipping the final season was the right call.
Yeah, because I remember the fellow. I can't remember what his name is now, but he's a rather wonderful actor.
British guy?
He was a British actor who was on My Beautiful Laundrette. He was in My Beautiful Laundrette. He was he was playing the Iraqi.
Which Naveen Andrews.
Yes, Naveen.
Yeah.
Wonderful actor.
Yeah, he's great.
And he keeps popping up, and he's always worth watching, I think.
My mind was blown when I heard him speak in his actual British speaking voice. It was
Yeah, are you
out of body.
That always happens where you watch somebody who does not have an American accent. Like I'm thinking like with what's his name, Matthew Rhys-Jones from The Americans. He's Welsh.
Yeah, he's British.
Yes.
He's Welsh. I'm thinking so it's a very distinct accent, but he plays an American beautifully.
I'm a huge fan of The Wire.
We're doing it well enough.
The leads on there are both British, and I was like blown away when I heard them speak in their actual British voice.
Yeah. I mean, I just find it so lovely how the American accent is so interesting, and particularly the American accent which is used on TV and films, which seems to be a sort of debased Boston a choice, and yet when you speak to real people in your country, they've all got sort of this massive different accents, and rather like we have here. And what I've got is this strange thing which was really invented in schools.
So Dom has that same kind of. I've always heard it called like an Oxford accent, like people who go to Oxford.
Yeah, we probably would call it RP, received pronunciation. It used to be called the King's English or BBC English. Now the BBC wants regional accents. So, but it's all because of this vowel change. I have to be very careful saying that.
When I tuned into the circle, I was like blown away by all the northern accents that were so prevalent. It was jarring to me because I've spent so long hearing just one very posh British accent.
It's not so posh. RP isn't that posh, but it's but it was sort of the accent of the ruling group.
Yeah.
For a long time, really until the 1960s. And then region accents crept in properly, and we should celebrate these accents as one should in America. But some of them in America I find very difficult to understand. But then probably you have the same problem with us,
yeah, absolutely.
I have spent a decade trying to get Tom to tell me these sorts of things. I'm always fascinated by how American accent sounds to British people, but he just like won't ever get into it with me.
But so much of it is about the shape of the mouth and what you do with the mouth, and you seem to open the mouth in a very big way, and whereas we certainly in the RP world, the idea is hardly to open the mouth at all. If you get down to the Queen, it's sort of the lips don't move because it's really quite roots inside the mouth, and that's it. There is no lip movement. It's like looking at Joe 90 or Captain Scarlet.
Must be very difficult for people who have to read lips because your lips don't move.
Yeah, it must be. Well, it must be difficult if you've got a beard as well. I remember doing opera for the deaf community, which was wonderful, and I remember going into.
Wait! I got it back up. You did opera for the deaf community. Please explain.
Yes. Well, we needed money, and this is quite a good way to get. But so there wasn't a signing on the side of the stage, and I thought, why don't we bring the signing into the production? So teach the singers how to sign, and we could open, we could give access to live theatre or ordinary theatre to the deaf community, and it was very popular. You know, there are many people in the deaf community have got acquired deafness,
Right.
and levels of hearing anyway, and there are some people who are completely deaf and have no hearing, but you know, the opera is very big, and you've got a lot of sort of vibrations and noise and sort of and these big passionate stories going on. So yeah, we put the signing into the.
Yeah, it never occurred to me, but now that you're saying it, it makes sense that even if somebody is profoundly deaf, and as you said, not everybody who identifies as deaf really has no hearing, right? Many of them do have some residual hearing, but even for those who don't, like you said, there's still a lot of opera, and I am not an opera fan, and I've never really understood it, to be honest. But a lot of it you're saying is just the spectacle. Right.
Yes,
and the sets and the costumes and the right.
Well, that as well. But you've also got these vibrations because the orchestra is so big and the whole thing is so big. You can just sort of lie on the floor and feel this passion coming through. But the point of my story was that in the process of developing this, I was taken off to some deaf centres, and I remember going in, and the whole thing was very quiet. And somebody said to me, "Oh, they're having a big argument." And there was no noise. I thought, this is my world. This is a world I quite like. And I found in the production, we would have a laugh from the hearing audience, and then we would have a laugh at a different moment from the non-hearing audience.
Interesting.
Because we'd have different speeds of jokes and different speeds of sort of comprehension and so on.
So they have to wait another beat until the sign language interpreter catches.
Or what was being signed was actually slightly different, because you know, why do we want one group of people to have all the fun? So we had our own particular messages. But now anyway, this takes me off into a different direction. Do we ever have multiple languages in future episodes of Survival?
You mean are there people who have not been native English speakers? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
It's certainly happened, and there's certainly been times where, like, I'm thinking just to the top of my head, I'm thinking about Amy Maria, Colin, people where definitely like the lack of fluency, even people who are like people like Amy, who speak English very, very well. I don't want to say she doesn't, but the fact that it is not her native language and she didn't grow up in America, it definitely affected her gameplay. And we've certainly talked about this, like when I covered just the other seasons of The Circle, we're talking about Brazil and France, and and how a country's reality TV can really kind of show you a window into the culture. So certainly, yes, when you take somebody who is not American in the sense that they did not grow up in the United States, or even if they did, but they're not a native English speaker, this is not the language they use every day, then it definitely can become an issue. And there was even a tough contestant with Nina, one of the more recent seasons. What is her I don't remember her last name, Colin.
I don't know. And then there's also another deaf contestant on Amazon.
That's right. I forgot about Christy.
Yeah, Christy.
Right.
Nina. Oh, I will get
whatever. But so her issue. So Nina's issue was that she was fine during the day because she read lips.
Nina,
she said, like, at night when they would kind of all, or even just sit around the fire, or then even just like at night when there was no fire, people would talk. They talk in the shelter, and she just couldn't participate in all of that because she couldn't read lips. And I'm trying to remember if that was also an issue with Christy. But Christy, I'm saying, so some of these people have actually done quite well, but it's definitely an issue.
For sure. There's no question about it. Yeah.
So there really is problems with some diversity with this sort of game.
They've gotten better about it, but yes, it is an issue. It is definitely an issue. But even again, the setup of the show, like, and this is why I'm such a big fan of The Circle, because there's no reason that a deaf person can't play Survivor, except I'm just thinking about, what do they do about like changing out the hearing aids and the batteries in their hearing aids?
I have no idea.
I'm assuming that they found a way to work around that.
Yeah.
But
well, there must be a crew. I mean,
Oh no, there absolutely is a crew, and so we can even. I mean, this might be a good time. It also came up in the episode where they're talking about how to how to attract the attention of the flyover, right, for the SOS challenge, and so there was a whole discussion about how to get the attention, and like it was Kelly, or they were talking about like using colored condoms.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a silly thing.
Really, silly, but it kind of reminded me. Look, it's like, but they're not going to have access to.
I think that again was set up simply to get Dirk to respond, and his response was a bit of a throwaway, and it went nowhere. I think they were setting Dirk up with that. I'm afraid. I mean,
putting Dirk on the show, it felt like to me was kind of a setup to get this reaction out of him along the way, for as long as he could stay.
Because I mean, you wouldn't see a colored condom from a
right.
But you would see. The point is, I just wanted to talk about the medical kit. There are certain things that they do have access to, and that probably would be my answer in terms of the heating aid batteries. But yes, they absolutely have access to condoms.
Oh, do they? Oh, right. So that would be one of the things they have access to.
Yes, and in terms of like, and you can have. So it's very interesting. Like you can get almost any prescription medication,
Right.
but but like I said, but it's interesting. But if you fall down, you don't necessarily get a Band-Aid. Or I don't think you have, you don't get, you can't take a Tylenol if you have a headache. But if there's something that's prescribed and is vetted before the show, you can get that. And they do have,
presumably they have medics out there who
absolutely
monitor what you're doing, and
absolutely.
Yes, they most definitely do.
Because there would be quite a lot of insurance.
But it's just interesting about what they do and don't have, just in case anybody. So Tim, obviously you're not familiar with this, and maybe some of our listeners also aren't. So things like they don't have toilet paper, right? Because that's one of those things, they're surviving. But they do have menstrual products, because people have always said about that, like what happens with a woman. I'm sure it's not great, but you can have tampons, and you can have contact lens solution. And yeah, because people don't necessarily, and again, production doesn't want people. You want these people to look hot. So if people feel like they look better without their glasses, they get contact lens solution. And now at least they get sunscreen. But I'm not sure. Did they always get sunscreen?
No,
they didn't for a little while, but they certainly lather it on now.
Right.
There have definitely. I can certainly remember Rupert getting an enormous sunburn and Cochran getting an enormous sunburn. But
I think Cochran, that one, I think they did have sunscreen, and he just wasn't using it.
Yeah, I think at the very least by the season 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there, they have been religious about sunblock, and with good reason.
Right.
Yeah, but there's a politically correct issue here. The whole production would be at fault if it didn't provide something like that.
Yeah.
It just the long-term consequences are too horrific.
People would get burnt to a crisp if
they didn't. And as somebody who has had skin cancer, putting me, I am like the whitest person on earth, and putting me in the South Pacific for 39 days with no sunscreen. Yeah, I mean, it would be. I think their point is they want people to be very, very, very unhappy when they're on the show, but they shouldn't have any long-term consequences.
Exactly. I think that's the exact line. They want it to be suffering now, but as soon as you're out, it's fine. It's Yeah.
But anyway, and the condoms is because, has there ever been, has anybody really had sex on Survivor? Different opinions on that. But it may have happened. So same thing. You want to talk about consequences that people might not want. That's why they now get condoms in the medical kit.
Yeah.
Right. And where is the medical kit?
It's something.
You request it. you can just ask for it.
It's different probably in every season, but there's a place that they know that they can go to get their meds and get their tampons and get a condom, or they all know where it is.
I see. Okay.
So we were talking about the SOS challenge. So what they do, so SOS, so for Tagi, they have, they wear their yellow rain slickers, which still cracks me up, the idea that they have raincoats, and they're lying down, they're making kind of snow angels.
Yeah, and you think they had a sort of tip off of when the plane was coming over? Otherwise,
they were told 2 hours after sunrise. Now, again, they don't have watches, but they have a sense. They've been there for a while. They
were doing this for 2 hours.
No, they were told for the next day. So they're saying tomorrow, 2 hours after sunrise. So they worked for a long time on this.
No, I'm positive that when the plane was about to fly over, the producer said, "Okay, now's the time." There's no way they were out there doing jumping jacks.
Oh, yeah, no.
Hours. There's no way.
They flagged it, or they can just come on. They see they can see and hear the plane.
Yeah, you can hear it
because actually they had a number of camera shots which must have been taken from the ground, so they had to get the camera people out of shot for the plane to come over.
Right.
So there's a lot of logistics they needed to be told about that. There's a line, incidentally, which we've missed, which I think is quite significant.
Please.
Do you think I was done with that sentence?
Yes.
I can't remember who says it, but it's part of a big confrontation. Is it Sean?
It was Rich who said that. Who said,
Richard.
It was Rich. Who said, "Do you think I'm done with that sentence?"
He is so angry, and then he starts talking about alliances. But I just thought that was
I'm glad you flagged that. Right, but he calls Rich calls alliances sneaky. Right, he didn't say what.
Yeah, but then he watched them.
Sneaky.
And then and then it's not very long before he says, "Oh, the alliances have already begun," without him doing much.
Right, and we talked about this in the past because a lot of Survivor fans, what people remember is that Rich is the one who was responsible for the concept of alliances, and that's just simply not true.
I see.
Right, we saw Kelly and Stacey in the first episode already a little bit.
Yeah, and here it looks as if alliances are going on without that he's late to this game. Or
right, it's Stu and Kelly hook up before Rich joins.
Yeah.
So he was definitely among the first, but saying, there never would have been alliances if it wasn't for Rich. And some people see the choice. Some people thought it would have been horrible if Rich hadn't existed and we never had alliances. The game never would have worked. And then obviously there's the flip side, the people who at the time, alliances were actually very controversial.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you can speak to this, that the whole idea about ganging up on people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was a major debate almost among the players at a certain point about whether or not alliances were okay, like within the grand morality of Survivor or whatever. And yeah, no, I definitely think it is fair to say that Kelly and Sue had, what else would you call it besides an alliance, long before Rich came along trying to make this a thing. I would say Rich is certainly entering the game well aware that alliances are the way to ensure your own short-term safety at the very least. Like, I don't think it made the episode, but there's some sort of bonus scene. I definitely remember this footage existing of Rich on the boat on day one as they're about to get marooned, explaining to Ramona, who's on the other tribe, right? Yes. Exactly what he's going to do. He's like, we're going to bring, what he's hoping to do at least is we're bring people together, is the name of the game here. So I do definitely think it's fair to say that
might be where the idea came from.
Right, exactly. Right. It's certainly not fair to say that alliances would never have happened without Richard Hatch. That's definitely not a fair take.
Right.
The mind for him early.
The other thing which I noticed around this point is Rudy. Really, Rudy's only seen, and he's not even in the scene, but he's the object of the scene, which is about the girl saying that they like him, and at least he's honest, even though he's sort of a bit sort of
crotchety, but he's honest.
Crotchety, but honest. And again, that's sort of, it seems to me to be a sort of confessional thing. And after the event, so we don't see that. We don't see him being honest in this episode. Whereas we actually could have done. We've seen plenty of his honesty and directness before.
Right. Not what they're banking
not as much as we saw with BB.
Yeah.
We need more. So maybe he's being very careful with his honesty, but yes, it's I suspect honesty is a euphemism anyway.
I think they're kind of doing the math on Rudy has to vote for someone, and we don't really want to bring Sean or Dirk into this group, so it's going to be Rudy, I guess.
Right, and Rudy initially didn't want to do it, and then later on he will become semi-okay about voting as a block. But initially, he's an Navy SEAL. He didn't feel that was playing fair.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So anyway, we saw what happened with the SOS. Tagi wins. They drop the bag, and then you talked about their whole reaction to it.
It wasn't the only thing they dropped, by the way.
Yeah.
As they move away, they drop litter. They actually drop the instructions on the ground, and you can see that as the camera thinks that's a nice bit of litter. Then it's left there.
Interesting.
Oh,
yeah, not environmentally approvable.
I'm sure that they have to clean up after themselves.
They should have been instructing the viewer at the time and cleaning up there on camera. So
I agree. I'm standing firm with that take. We need to be setting a good example here.
We need to be setting a good example. Exactly. No litter mongering. Even if
there's no circumstance under which that's acceptable, even if you're on Survivor. That's
But I was thinking too, this was filmed in 1999/2000. Yeah, I guess even back then, because I'm old enough again to remember that. I mean, there was a whole idea about don't be a litter bug, but
litter bug. That's it.
But here, it's really at this point, it really is quite. You still see it, but you don't see it nearly as often, where people will just drop their trash on the floor and or the ground and leave. But certainly, when I was a kid, it was much more socially acceptable than it is now.
Yeah, but we've already had all that stuff. With Gretchen complaining about all the litter and the chaos in the camp in the first place.
Right. Well, again, because she was the only adult at Pagong, and so she was just.
This is presumably the same. Was she in Pagong or was she in?
No, Gretchen's in Pagong.
Yeah.
All right, and it's Gretchen who's complaining, isn't it?
Yeah.
About all the mess and about the. And about the shovel and so on.
Yeah.
So I thought for a second it was the same. It was the same team that was leaving the litter, but I think this litter was simply a nice sort of focus pull. But it's a focus pull on something that is unacceptable.
Right.
It needs to be called out.
I respect that.
It's not like they have a trash bag. I don't even know what they do with their trash. It's a good question.
What trash?
Well, like the moon, you collect it and you send it back to where it came.
Probably. So just trying to back to the episode. So then the next thing we already spoke about the whole thing with the alliances, and Rich said, it already started, right? So we've done that. Then we go back to, and Tim, you flagged this earlier about Ramona calls Jenna her first white friend. And like I said, and on the one, it seems very nice and affirming and all that. But then the next thing we see almost is Gretchen says, she's feeling better, and then Jenna says, her work ethic is improving, but not her attitude. There's too little, too late, and she'll say that again later. And that's what made me say, like with friends like this, who needs enemies. I would love to know. Do you know anything about her reaction? Has there ever been anything about when she watched it, Colin?
Ramona? I don't know, although I do know. And this has, for one reason or another, been kind of a surprise to me. I guess just because she ended up going out so early, so long ago. But Ramona, I feel like at least these last few years has been popping up, at least from time to time, at various Survivor-related events. So it wouldn't surprise me if Ramona has a reaction out there in some sort of talking seabird-esque thing that I'm not aware of, but. Right. It does seem to me, at least, like Ramona didn't take any. I'm sure it wasn't easy by any stretch being eliminated early, but it does seem like she's at least maintained some level of interest in the show. So I don't think she holds any grudges at the very least.
No, not against the show. I don't know how she feels about Jenna. Because I'm saying,
that's true. That's a fair question.
Watching it, I was like, this has got to be hard to watch. That you think you made a white friend, and your white friend is like,
I would guess that was probably not
received
something she enjoyed, although I also wouldn't be shocked if her degree of enthusiasm about hanging out with Jenna Lewis maintained that same level for too long. So I don't know how heartbroken she necessarily is.
Yeah, no, but that's
I just thought in this episode she was the sort of girl I would have liked to get to know.
Absolutely.
The stuff we learned about her, there are so many threads which just you want to see more. This is an introduction to somebody, and if this is what we have when people are going out, this is the point at which they start to get introduced. I find this rather sad. element about the show.
Right.
Because I learned a lot in those few minutes, in those few clips about Ramona, which I hadn't learnt about before.
Right.
And I think that's sad and regrettable. And she's certainly out of the people in the show so far, she's quite high on my list of people that I want to meet.
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
Because of those clips.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the bit where they're playing around in the water. Actually, just after she'd talked about having a new friend and all sort of stuff, there was lots of splashing around in the water. It was just charming.
Yeah.
Charming.
Yeah. No, I don't think that her tribe, it was just one of those things where it's not like her tribe hated her. It's that, they have to vote somebody off. And, at least until relatively recently at that point, she was not contributing much.
Oh, I was going to say.
Yeah.
Is it necessary for them to wear war paint in that meeting? It's so ugly. It's so ugly. I mean, if I were in Survivor, I would refuse.
I think that's something they wanted to do. We see it over the course of a few seasons.
Really?
People show up for
it's up there with the mud baths. It's something that I just think is
It's a bonding thing, I believe, in most cases at least. It's them trying to get on the same page before a big important challenge. Necessary is certainly not a way I would describe it, but there's so little to do out there.
That's what I was going to say. These people are bored.
Yeah.
Right? So if production wants to give them some paint or whatever, they're going to use it.
Right.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, you can speak to this because you again, with being in the circle.
Well, I suppose. How
much downtime did you have where you just, where you weren't communicating with people?
I was never bored. I was never bored, but then I could draw. I had the occasional book, not very many books. And I was thinking the other day, somebody asked me whether or not I would go on Big Brother. I thought, Big Brother without any paper, without any books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be throwing myself. I'd be beating the grass, I think.
Yeah.
Frustration. What would I do? I don't think I've ever had a day without an opportunity to draw. I'd start. There'd be a dirty protest, I think, on the wall.
But I'm with you on that. But I'm saying, but they do have lots.
Would you join my dirty protest, Karen? Yeah. Sorry.
But no, it's fine.
I must behave. Right.
No, we don't want you to behave, Tim. Then the podcast gets boring. Don't.
Yeah. Okay. But I hated the war paint. It's up there.
Do you know why you hated it that much? Because I'm just trying to understand your reaction.
I don't know why I hate it. I don't know. I just think it just. I think that's part of my sort of Peter Pan irritation. And I got a lot of fondness for Peter Pan, but there's some things I just find deeply irritating. I all day, but I mean, so camping and sort of camping games and war paint and sort of getting muddy, I find it's all rather unattractive. I find dirt fairly unattractive.
I'm in on that.
It might just
definitely agree.
Colin, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, yeah. Did you want to put face paint on when you saw this when you were 12, Colin?
Probably, man. I definitely was. I think relating more to that tribe, the younger people compared to people on the Tagi tribe. I was a big Greg fan in particular. I'm guessing I would have.
But I think Greg is extraordinarily attractive.
I would guess Greg is doing the face painting kind of tongue in cheek. I don't think he's earnestly saying I'm fired up. What's that?
Did Greg start the face? Is Greg the author of the face painting?
No, but I think he participated knowing this is kind of a weird thing to do, but everyone else seems into it. And this is, what else do we have going on right now?
Right. That's the other thing. And if you're on a tribe where everybody else is painting their faces, then you need to paint your face too.
100%. Yeah. You do not want to be the one person saying, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, but Tim, we don't see this throughout the season. I mean, in modern history, we've seen it very occasionally. But in Modern Survivor, it's not something that we normally see. So it's not something that you have to see every week.
So my gripes today, in order, probably are face paint. I I know if I were to be completely politically correct, it would be the other way around. But I think the face paint is up there as one of the great no-nos of this episode, and frankly of society.
So if you had to get rid of only one, would you rather this episode maintain the face paint or maintain the pro-littering stance?
Oh, how horrible. How horrible. Well, I think I would just close my eyes. Maybe.
Well, I mean, obviously, the politically correct answer is you have to keep the face paint and get rid of the littering, because littering is an environmental issue when the face paint is just annoying Tim.
Yeah. Can we not make the face paint?
That's the politically correct answer. You can answer whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm just still trying to figure out why you're so upset with the face paint, but I'm not sure.
I think some of those people were so beautiful anyway, and then they got these horrible blotches all over them. I just think, oh God, that's so unattractive. I
don't think anybody looked at Colin in face paint and thought that made her less attractive. I don't know.
They don't have mirrors anyway. No one's concerned about that sort of thing.
I'm sure they have mirrors, Colin.
No,
I'm sure
they don't.
They sure don't.
Do they not? Do they not?
There's a whole thing, at least in Modern Survivor, there's a whole thing where the first time they actually get to see themselves after they're voted out or at the end of the game. No, they do not have access to a mirror.
Oh my goodness, no! So it's like going back into the Middle Ages. That must be extraordinary.
They all are blown away. Like Robin Williams looking at himself in Jumanji when he gets back from the jungle. Not that you can relate to.
Well, I can relate exactly to that at the moment. This is not one of my Mrs. Doubtfire days.
So we get to the immunity.
I was a boy when lockdown began.
It certainly feels like it's been a long time.
What?
Yeah.
It certainly feels like it's been a very long time.
Yeah. And Robin Williams is trending on Twitter. Did you know that?
No. What's
for what?
I have no idea what it's about. I thought, oh my goodness,
I'll look it up right now.
We know he didn't die because normally when you see somebody trending on Twitter, that's the first thing.
I think people are saying what a great talent he was, and how
absolutely. But I mean, was it his birthday, or there's some reason for some reason?
No, it doesn't seem to have been his birthday.
For some reason, he's trending.
But every so often, these sort of strange you get these strange blips, and Robin Williams was trending today. I think
it's a suicide awareness thing. There are a lot of like Anthony Bourdain.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I saw Anthony Bourdain. Oh, okay, now that makes sense. Yeah, that must be what it is.
Well, okay. So it's very important. He was a great man as well. He is a great man.
Yeah.
The wonderful thing about television and film is your life lives on.
For sure.
Oh yeah. Robin Williams will have millions and millions of fans who only discovered him after he was gone.
Yeah.
Okay, so just back to the episode, the immunity challenge. Again, this was very hard to follow, and like you said, without
it was impossible. It was the directions were impossible. The actual execution was impossible. So many cameras following things backward. I was lost and slightly bored at that point.
Right. It's going to be complicated when Jeff pulls in a captain from each tribe and busts out like a map to explain point A, point B, point C, point D. Like, now go tell your tribe all these things we have to do. It is crazy what a different sort of challenge this is than anything we've seen in decades at this point with all these.
So you wouldn't have anything like this now?
You would have obstacle courses, but nothing like this.
Normally, obstacle courses are very, very common now. But again, they're kind of in one place, right? So
multiple locations,
cameras, and you're not going to have them running through the woods because it's just very difficult to get the right camera angles doing it, right? So yes, it was.
The other thing is that they both had hidden treasure. So what I don't quite understand is what was one hidden treasure better hidden than the other, because I don't think that was fair. And one sand pit was caving in all the time, the other sand pit wasn't. But how do you control that? How do you make sure that?
It could just be that Rich and Rudy. I mean, digging in sand is hard, and apparently Rich and Rudy cleared that entire thing out with the treasure chest. I heard it took 10 minutes. for them.
I would have guessed way longer than that.
But apparently Rich and Rudy were a machine is the point. So
yes,
it looks like it's going right. So it does look like the sand is caving in on Pagong, and Tagi is just, but apparently that is, I don't know exactly how they were able to do that, but for whatever reason. And then Rudy, and then this is one shot I did want to just talk about. After they get the treasure chest, rather than even the two of them carry them, or I don't know, maybe somebody had to carry it, but they gave it to Rudy, who's 72 years old, and he didn't kind of drag it. He picks it up in his arms and he runs with it.
I mean, we see from Rudy, he does 100 push-ups every morning, even while he's playing Survivor. Like that, he's 72 years old, but I mean, he's a Navy SEAL badass. Right. And to me, honestly, the thing about this challenge was, I'm pretty sure the digging was happening like concurrently with the running through the jungle or whatever. And either way, it seemed like the disparity between Rich and Rudy digging for one side, and then it was Gretchen and Jenna on the other side. I mean, the chests were so deep in the sand, and you had to clear so much that it really seemed to me like that was basically all the challenge came down to, is who could get the chest out faster. And that's such an unfair matchup that it was like, and all of this stuff and all of these other legs were like almost completely incidental.
Well, but this happens all the time. It's funny you say this, Colin, because again, what happens all the time now in modern Survivor is, I would say 85% of the time now, the challenge will often be like some kind of an obstacle course and then a puzzle.
Right. It's who can get a 3-minute head start maximum.
Right. It almost doesn't even matter what happens before.
Mm-hmm. You're very lucky if you have even a 3-minute head start on the puzzle after the challenge.
Right. So in any case, we didn't really get to see all of it, but it's clear. But but Tagi wins, so Pagong gets to go to tribal council. And
but I also think the producers had decided that the challenge was too confusing, because they simply edited it.
Yeah,
It was all about energy rather than about explanation.
This might be where they figured out that we can't really capture things where people are running through the jungle. So,
well, I remember certainly Ethan Zahn ran through the jungle. I guess it would have been All Stars, a very early challenge there, and then for sure season 12, the opening challenge was one person for each of the 4 tribes running through the jungle on edge of extinction, but that was a much smaller and much more clear jungle where they had infinite time to set it up and make sure it looked good.
Right. And again, this was seasons later with a bigger budget. And, sometimes you just have to try something to see what works and doesn't work.
For sure. Yeah. There's a lot of
easier to shoot when you just set up a course and everything's right in front of you. And like I said, you could do it with stable cameras. And I think that's normally what they do now.
For sure. It's been at least 10 years since we've seen anyone run through the jungle like this, other people looking for idols.
Right. That's the other time we see it, is when people are hunting for these idols that, again, they don't have yet in Survivor. But even then, sometimes you do have people like flat out sprinting, but not that often.
Not often, yeah.
But again, and the reason probably is it's really, really hard to shoot that.
Yeah.
So anyway, for whatever reason, Tagi wins. So we get to Pagong. And like you said, we flagged this before that Probst lays out for us that Ramona got 3 votes the last time, but Jervis is weak in the challenges, right? And so that's kind of set up that's going to be our choice there.
Yes, but then we've got him being asked this thing about does he feel confident and then does he feel vulnerable? And he managed. So who feels confident? He says, I feel confident,
right?
And then that's who feels vulnerable. He says, well, I feel vulnerable now that I've said I feel confident. I thought that was there weren't very many moments in this episode of humor, and that was one of the best.
I totally agree. I cracked up with that.
I thought it was I thought not only was it humorous, but it was deeply, deeply charming. And up till now, this is a character who hasn't really sort of charmed me.
Right. He will. I think he will.
Now he has. So the two people to come out of this show this week for me are Jervis and Romana, and one of them's off.
No.
Right. Potentially both of them were off. So I find that very strange that it seems this whole episode is slightly skewed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been a very odd episode to watch. I felt.
Yeah, Jervis raising his hand the first time and then recognizing what a mistake that was and raising his hand and saying, "Oh, I feel vulnerable now," was incredible. Yeah,
But
beautiful, a beautiful reality TV moment, actually.
Yes.
And Jervis, so I will just tell you, I'm not going to tell you how he does this season, but Jervis came back just relatively recently, like 15 years after his first season.
And is he charming?
He is still very charming.
He's the exact same guy. He seems to be the exact same guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, I warmed to both Jervis and Romana, and if I've got if I have a wish for this week, it would be to meet either of them. I think because they're just delightful.
We will see what we can do.
I'm placing it there, Karen.
Yeah. I may have, I know somebody who knows somebody who knows a guy.
How lovely! How lovely! It's like I dance with a man who danced with a girl who danced with the Prince of Wales.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I absolutely understand because Jervis is, like I said, even just with these little snippets, you can see that and he's going to be good TV. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, well, I will be looking out for him now, but it's strange because it's taken quite a lot of time for the characters to start to emerge. So what we get in the opening episodes seem to me to be a certain number of ciphers, and it's difficult because it's the reality situation, the survival situation sort of almost takes over the development of character, and what we want to be able to get to see character. Mostly when we're looking at character, we're wanting to see vulnerability,
right?
And vulnerability is the last thing anybody wants to show, because they want to look strong.
But if you know anything about making TV, right, then you know that that's what they're looking for.
Yeah,
and you know this also from your season, right? That vulnerability is good TV.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean it's not real.
I know.
Yeah, so can I actually ask you a question along these lines?
Please.
When you were in the Circle house or apartments or whatever they're called, the Circle complex, how often, if at all, did you ever find yourself thinking, I should do this because that would be great for TV?
Because I have a background in sort of directing and designing theatre. I was an actor for a while, and I have a background in looking at text because of my sort of academic background. So really, whatever I did, I was very much aware.
Right.
Right. No, I definitely. Being aware, I think that was kind of.
It wasn't just being aware at the moment, but I was aware of things that might have happened. So at one point, I was asked, I think, would you like to go up to the garden? Would you like to use the hot tub? And I said, absolutely not. I have nothing to wear. And then the next day, an Edwardian swimming costume appeared on my door, and I thought, I either go along with this,
right,
and they know what they're doing,
right,
sure,
and we make interesting TV, and we have a bit of a sort of giggle, and then there's an opportunity within that to actually do something. To have a serious conversation too, and sort of play around with all that, or I defy it, in which case I'm difficult, and I miss a good opportunity. The opportunities were all over the place. It was just a matter of taking them.
Did you? I guess I was just getting at. I certainly understand being aware. Of course, you're going to be aware with your whole background of this being a TV product and what they would be on the lookout for, but. I guess I was more just wondering if you ever felt compelled to give a bigger reaction than you otherwise would have to some alert or whatever, anything along those lines.
Oh, it was made very clear to me on one or two occasions, because we were taken from the room to upstairs to the garden and various other things, and on the way, you'd meet a runner or a producer or something, and there would be a grump occasionally that I didn't look very happy by being selected as an influencer.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking, well, I'm not happy. I don't like that. I don't like this job, because I know that once I'm so I knew I wasn't giving a big enough response to things, and so whatever response I did give, I think they did as much as they used as much as they could.
But did they ever ask you to do it again?
No.
Or they would just kind of remind you in general that they need big reactions?
No, I don't remember that ever happening. I don't.
Well, and again, they probably don't have to with you because
you don't need much direction.
Knowing,
yeah.
right,
well, everybody needs.
And I'm not sure that all the.
It's not that you need direction. You just need to trust. You just need to trust the production company that it's going to do something with what you've given them. I was generally, when I gave a reaction to something, I would give more than one line. So I did that routinely. I spent 10 years while I was living in Greece recording things for English as a foreign language, and so I was very used to doing sort of recordings, and you would give sort of 10 or 15 takes on a particular line, so the crew had an opportunity to take something useful. And even when I'm doing podcasts, I find myself quite often repeating the same idea 2 or 3 times, and that's pointless because it's going live. But you get into a habit of doing this sort of thing. So I think that
it's better to give too much rather than not enough.
You just keep giving until you sort of expire with exhaustion. You can see people on Survivor doing the same sort of thing. People have got an instinct about this, and I think it's quite a good way to live in real life. You don't need to be decisive about everything. You sort of stumble along and sort of hope that one of your comments works.
That's kind of how I ended up with a podcast. So,
well, it's how I ended up being a professor, I think. What's extraordinary is there's an assumption that I know the answer to things. I know the answer to nothing, but I know that there's 10 possible answers. I'll give them all. Somebody will go away with the right one. I have no idea which one is correct.
Right, so that's the only other thing I had on my list for today was just the next week. We're seeing, Sue and Sean argue, not surprisingly, given what we just saw. And then we know we're going to get to see more of Colin and Greg.
Yes. Yes. Right. And that's supposed to be a bit racy.
Yeah. We told you about that condom box. You thought we were lying?
Yeah, well... yeah. And then the only other thing I've got here is the Romana thing a little too little too late, which is rather sad.
Yes, she said it again. Yeah.
But I think
it wasn't mean enough the first time she said it. She said it again in her voting confessional.
Well, if something's good enough to be said once, it's good enough to be said again, and how very much I liked her, so it's good enough to say.
There you go.
How very much I very much enjoyed this, Colin. And Colin, where can we find you normally?
So
Tim is taking over the podcast. I'm just going to sit back.
I'm so sorry.
No.
The only thing I was going to ask before I ask Colin that, I just wanted to ask if there's anything else you want to add for this episode or just in general, anything I didn't touch on.
Me or Tim?
Colin, I think first.
Okay, so I mean,
both of you, but yeah.
To me, it was. I don't even remember the last time that I watched any of Borneo. It's certainly been many, many years, but it was a season I had returned to at least a few times in my first decade or so of being a Survivor fan. But after this long pause, I mean, I cannot remember ever in my life rewatching an episode of Survivor and being more surprised and feeling more like I was seeing it for the first time. And it was so refreshing. And I did want to, on the record, thank you guys for an opportunity an excuse to do this sort of thing and to get to talk about this. I've spent so much time talking about the last few years of Survivor and so little time talking about these early days and how we got to this point in the first place. So this is, having watched this episode again has really inspired me to go back and watch some of these early. I've been watching a little of Marquesas intermittently. I've been really mixing it up and trying to expose myself to to experience more of the older seasons just to refresh my memory, and it's been a real treat. So thank you very much for inspiring all of that. And it's been such a pleasure getting to talk to both of you, and Tim getting to interact with one of my favorite people I've seen on reality TV in such a long time. So this has been a real treat. Thank you very much.
Well, it's a real treat to meet you too.
Yeah. And so while we're at it, Colin, so then now please tell us where people can find you.
So I do my own podcast with my own British friend over at it's just Google Dom and Colin. Dom as in Dominic, DOM is the way to do that. It's domandcolin.com if you want to find that, or just on iTunes.
domandcolin.blogspot.com, I think.
You can just go to domandcolin.com and it'll redirect you. Yeah, it'll take you there. Listen, the kid has a literal master's degree in computer science and cannot do any better than our Blogspot website that we've had for a decade at this point.
And I shouldn't be telling you what your URL is.
No. You are 100% right. That is the technical URL. And then I'm on Twitter at Colin Stone, COLINSTONE. I think that's pretty much it. Not much else going on.
Yeah, and Survivor. But,
what's that?
But I just want to say, the things you cover, not only Survivor, but sometimes Big Brother.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Circle, right? All kinds of reality TV, and also sometimes documentaries.
Yeah, we do all sorts of stuff. Now Survivor is in an indefinite hiatus, so I'm sure we'll be expanding even further beyond that than we did. Oh, Tim, we actually did podcasts about your season. If you want,
really?
I was Dom, the British guy, and another friend of ours watched them so much faster than I was able to and were so in love with them that I was actually not in time to be on that podcast. But yeah, if you want to hear roughly what our show is like, your own season is on there in some capacity for sure.
Well, if you want to review it with me at some point, I'd be delighted.
Absolutely.
I haven't seen most of it, so
I was going to say if you are ready/willing to watch your season, then I would love to do that with you.
Yeah.
Or if it just doesn't be episode by episode, but just one podcast or a series of podcasts, that would be amazing.
I had a sort of concluding question, really, Colin, which is, do you think my response so far to this episode is what you would have expected, or are you disappointed in my response?
No. So I'm certainly not disappointed at all. I've been fascinated, and kind of what I flagged up at the beginning of the show is I cannot even imagine a more opposite point of view than the one that I have, where I've been on the ground floor but never been through any of it myself, whereas you experienced the whole thing firsthand and then now are getting into it with that kind of perspective in mind. I had no idea what even to really anticipate from that point of view, but no, I disappointed would be the entirely wrong word, I would say. I think you have a unique ability to talk about this sort of thing that I think many people would find interesting for sure. I think this is an awesome project. I think it is one of the Survivor is a landscape. The Survivor podcast landscape, I guess, is certainly not lacking people putting themselves out there, but this, I think, point of view is definitely one that is going to stand out from the crowd for sure.
Well, that's wonderful. So
thank you, Colin. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, I didn't know how this was going to go either, but everybody seems to be enjoying it. So we're going to keep doing it.
Well, Colin, you have to spread the word and come back.
Totally.
We will absolutely
and see how I've matured.
I would love to find out
how love without me. I mean, who knows what he's doing when he goes off when I'm not watching. Really, if you must watch another reality, there are many shows I could recommend that are not Survivor. If you want to, read ahead. But
yes.
Or if you must, I'm gonna actually suggest if you want to watch something, then you might as well watch one of the other show that this network is covering. So let me just do my thing here for a minute. So one thing I forgot to do at the beginning. So this is first of all, I'm going to thank. Oh, so I'm sorry, blank up again. I'm not having my best day here, Professor Tim. please remind everybody where they can find you on Twitter and Insta and YouTube and all the other places.
Oh my goodness, yes. But do you not have Instagram, Colin?
I don't. I never got hooked into Instagram. I do have Twitter, and I very sparingly use Facebook. But no, I am almost exclusively a Twitter guy.
I didn't even know Instagram existed until about a day before I went into the circle, and it was set up for me. Mm-hmm. And now I have lots of followers, and
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially for you, because Instagram is more, visual. And so whereas Twitter is, more wordsmithing. I mean, yes, you can put Twitter, fake pictures on Twitter now and vice versa, but generally that's kind of the split.
Well, I have Twitter as well, but I don't seem to use it very well, and I don't seem to have very many followers on Twitter. So maybe Colin, you can help me, and some of your followers on Twitter can come over to me. And
I would suspect that the Instagram demographic clientele, that they skew younger and much more towards the circle than Twitter people do. I would guess that. I don't know about the demographics of the circle. Is that right?
I understand when I was in the circle, Twitter was going a bit wild, and I did feature on Twitter, but it didn't seem to get into my Twitter account.
I don't know. So if I had to speculate, it would just be the demographics of Instagram users skew more towards circle watchers than those of Twitter, would be my guess.
Maybe. And anyway, you can find me on Twitter under Prof_Tim_Wilson, and in Instagram it's under Professor_Tim_Wilson, and then in YouTube I'm on a thing called Zontool Films Limited. That's ZONTUL FILMS LTD, all one long expansive word.
I'm assuming if people didn't write that down, that's already on your Instagram, right? The link too. So just go to Tim's Instagram; you'll find everything.
Yes. I think one gets penalised for putting other social media links on one's Instagram. So I think that means
really? I'm not a big Instagram person, but I think people put their other links.
Well, I don't really understand it at all. But I barely know how to switch on the computer. It's extraordinary given the fact computers seem to be all I do at the moment, and computers are my life. Is that sufficient? Have I covered everything there? Today I've been singing, and it's been terribly exciting. Yeah.
But that's also on your Instagram?
It's on Instagram.
You have to go right now.
Only on Instagram, actually. Yeah, you have to go to Instagram in order to hear me sort of singing like an early 20th century singer. Because of nice anniversary. History of the Music Hall, and you can get that in my YouTube. I
will absolutely check that out.
I'm about to publish part 2, which would take the history of the music hall, which in the States you would call a variety or burlesque or something.
Burlesque.
But burlesque is great. I just think I remember seeing Ann Miller and Mickey Rooney in Sugar Babies. Ann Miller was the lady who apparently could do more tap steps than anybody else. I don't think
I've seen it. It might be a little too. Like I said, we were both older than Colin. I'm not sure if Colin has seen it, but I certainly have.
But Mickey Rooney was in the original film Pete's Dragon, which you would remember when you're little, wouldn't you?
I certainly know who Mickey Rooney is.
Yeah, Mickey Rooney is one of the greats, really. And so the second part of this little documentary will come out in a few weeks' time, which will take the history of the music hall from the late 19th century through to about 1950. And so many of the ways that we look upon comedy and popular entertainment today are defined in that period. The idea that somebody listening just there, and the sort of confidential way that comics speak to us, all of that is worked out by these wonderful comedians and singers in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and also innuendo, which I think is such fun.
Tim loves his innuendo.
Well, I'm a great fan of Mary Lloyd. Mary Lloyd was shameless. So was Max Miller and all these wonderful people. Mary Lloyd had a little song, and every little movement has a meaning of its own. Every little...
Yeah, the name didn't ring a bell, but I know that song.
Oh, she's so naughty. Whatever she says is sort of wink, and you just think, she could read a washing up list, and it would sound obscene. But anyway, sorry, I've gone on, haven't I? Really, you've got to try everything now.
So you can find me. Someday I'm going to learn how to do this. That's my Twitter handle. Karen Talks a Lot on both Facebook and Instagram. I am at Karen Bell, Bell, like ding-a-ling, Eisenberg. And yeah, I am most active on Facebook. Sorry, people, I'm old, but you can also catch me on Twitter and Insta. Okay, a couple more minutes of housekeeping. So first of all, I forgot to do this up close. I'm going to the T-shirt that I am modeling today, and I'm doing a bad idea.
Oh, it's got a queen on it.
Yes, it's as the queen stays queen. This is a classic Survivor show. So it's referring to the whole thing with the queen, Tim. So there's a woman named Sandra who has won twice. Okay, was the first person to ever win twice. And so when she came back for the third time, this was her catchphrase. And I assume her point was, I may not win again, but it doesn't matter. The queen stays queen. So, yes, we are big fans of Sandra here. And you can purchase this and many other T-shirts at johnnyfairplay.com. And when you buy a T-shirt, you get a call from the great Johnny Fairplay. And he really does call you. If you do want him to call, please put your phone number in the comments. And please make sure your phone is on when you order, because sometimes that is how quickly he will call you back. Just looking forward here. So first of all, tomorrow, today is Tuesday. Yeah, so tomorrow we will be releasing Johnny's interview with Sunday BURQUEST of Survivor Millennials versus Gen X. For anybody who hasn't heard the news, I think yesterday, Sunday announced that she's already a breast cancer survivor, but she just got diagnosed with esophageal and ovarian cancer. She's very upbeat. She's coming out fighting again, but obviously it's a very concerning situation. So tomorrow you can catch that interview with her. Also, in commemoration and in solidarity with Sunday, a new shirt that either has been released or is about to be released. Sunday Schooled Cancer. That will be available on the website, and all profits for that shirt go to Sunday. Johnny is not making any money on the shirt. We just want to do it for the community and for Sunday, so that she knows that everybody's behind her. Next week, Johnny will be sitting down with Brandon Hance. And this Thursday, as usual, we have Labor of Love on Thursday night with Zach Hacker and Matt Bischoff discussing that week's episode. So that is where I'm ready to leave it. If there's anything else you guys would like to add.
Glad I didn't have to go after Brandon Hance. That's going to be exciting.
Aaron, who do we have as a guest next week?
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. I almost forgot. Our guest next week is going to be Rachel Wagner of the Hallmarkies podcast, doing something a little different. Rachel is a huge Survivor fan, but she also podcasts about Hallmark movies. So don't worry, we're not going to talk about Hallmark movies. I really have not seen a lot of Hallmark movies, but she also knows Survivor, and that's what we're going to be discussing about next week.
Excellent.
So, yes, thank you for reminding me.
Enormously. And Colin, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, this has been such a treat for me. This has been. It still hasn't even sunk into me that you're the same guy I spent so long rooting for on the circle. This is real story. Yeah.
And do invite me to come and talk with you and Dom.
Absolutely. No, I'm positive what's going to happen is we'll hang this up and like maybe an hour or two from now, it will finally sink into me that I just did all of this with you. So this is really, I'm getting close to that point, but not.
Well, I hope I came up to your expectations.
100%. Yes, absolutely.
But you're very kind. And I hope I haven't said anything inappropriate. I have a habit of saying inappropriate things.
I love it when this is Survivor NSFW, Tim. You can say anything you want. We love it when you get.
Yeah, but it's sort of fixed there in the in the internet ether, and I have no idea what sort of, oh my God, what sort of things have I said.
Well, you didn't want to have a political career again, did you? Right. So who cares? Seriously, who cares?
But then when you listen to some of the things Mr. Farage manages to say, I'm amazed he sort of manages to have a political career at all.
Oh, I mean, you've really got to turn it up many notches if you want to get on Nigel and Boris's level. You got to really start bringing up the heat.
I knew Boris when he was little, really.
Oh, wow.
So, really?
Yeah, because he came to Oxford just as I was about to leave, and our paths crossed on a few occasions. And I remember meeting him. I remember meeting his sister. And on election night, when he was elected, I was in a studio with his sister and his father. So we had quite an entertaining time, and with Mr. Corbyn's brother, who I also knew.
Oh, wow.
So we had quite an entertaining evening, really, all together. These strange links. I keep bumping into Mr. Corbyn's brother on the train, which is very odd. Yeah, he was. I the first time I met him, he seemed a bit smelly, but I think that was the dog that was accompanying him. So.
That might be the thing that gets you in trouble now. That's the one comment on the way out the door here.
Well, he was recently arrested for sort of protesting against lockdown.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, I don't think we need to worry too much about him getting offended.
Okay, good.
We're 2+ hours into a Survivor podcast. I seriously doubt that he's going to hear it. Somehow.
It could always be just so flagged up for him. Look.
Unless you ever do run for prime minister and somebody just has to go through everything you've ever said. Right? Short of that.
Well, it's either that or canonization, and I think the role of the devil's advocate has been ditched because people realize there's just too much information now. So you can't do it. As Gandalf would say, "You shall not pass." That's it. That's it. It's gone. It's gone. Flee, you fools!
I don't know about
from one wizard to another, as you say.
But I think that is about to be my ringtone.
Really?
I think that's a good place to leave it. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Please come back next week at 2 p.m. Eastern, where I will discuss episode 5 with Rachel Wagner. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.